Okay, so Meg, it really is a joy to see you and to meet with you and to talk about your work and your new book and the other many things you've been doing over these many years. Uh, what I've written about you in the past and try to encapsulate a little bit about your very long work and career. I talked about you as a warrior for the human spirit and a pathfinder. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit about your background and how you come
Sure.
to be doing this work before we get into more specifics about your current work and the new book that's
Yeah.
coming.
Well, depending on the day and my mood, I can describe my evolution differently. But one thing is clear. I have, since I was young, just felt free to be curious and inquire. And I was also exceptionally well helped by famous people, not famous people, who really mentored me and brought me along, and saved me from a lot of bad mistakes over the years. And I just had a lot of opportunities, but I've made good use of them. And I've also raised a very large family in the midst of this. Um, and now I'm turning 80, so I'm pretty content.
Yeah, welcome to the group. I turned 80 last year.
Yeah, my hair will never look like yours, however. I'll stay red as long as I can.
Well, good for you. If you
But
can
isn't
do it,
it,
do it.
I mean, we should, our eldership is really important, isn't
Yeah,
it?
truly
And
is.
why you're doing what you're doing and what I'm doing, what I'm doing. Like we'll
Yeah,
never stop, right?
indeed.
Yeah. And
Well,
it's
I'm
that
glad.
connection to meaningful work
Yes.
that is at the heart of what I'm doing
Mm,
now. Plus my profound, unending disappointment that it didn't work out positively as I thought early on. But we have to deal with reality. And so your work, my work, is ever more important because of the reality that we're
indeed.
in now.
Indeed. Well, as you know, I first learned about your work, I think when I read Leadership in the New Science, Discovering Order in a Chaotic World. And you said in that book, I have always thought of this book as a collection of intriguing maps, much like those used by the early explorers when they voyaged in search of new
Right.
lands. And I thought we kind of begin by having you just kind of share what you've learned. You've voyaged into some pretty interesting territory that have brought
Yeah.
you and me and all of us to this point in history. And what are some of the things that you discovered in a
Well,
way
I
that
think the,
allows you to, to live and to share still in this very
yeah,
difficult and somewhat chaotic times?
you could take the somewhat off of the description of chaotic, and I'd be happier for that.
I gotcha.
But so one of the things I've learned, preeminent learner about what it takes to create change. And in that, I feel I've learned a lot, but what I've learned is quite devastating. Change does not happen from good ideas, from clear evidence, from better demonstrable ways of doing things that give people, like I did so much work in corporate and government, that gives those leaders what they want. What I've learned is that the real paradigm at play, and this is like over and over now for all of us, is about power and greed and self-preservation. So those opening years of my own work where I thought all you had to do to change people's minds was to give them a better way of doing things and demonstrably better way of doing things. That's not what's operative in our human, among the people who are in power. And this is where your work is so important with men. We have to face the reality that it is power above all, and greediness for one's power and one's personal well-being that then drives everyone else into fear and self-protection. That's historically accurate description for every civilization, for every group that moved beyond tribal, connected to the land. Every hierarchy that is created, has been created for thousands of years, has those descriptors, those dynamics at play.
Interesting.
So, and the other thing I've learned is never give up on people, never give up on the human spirit.
Uh-huh.
And so, I first I was located in the sort of in the 90s, especially 80s and 90s, when we thought so much change was possible in organizations. I didn't know about these dynamics then. But since then, what's become so evident is that we cannot change hierarchy, power, but people are still people. And when we are together in community, we have enormous power. That also now is an area of great sadness because we no longer are together, period.
Indeed.
No.
Well, I know in your book, Who Do We Choose to Be? Facing Reality, Claiming Leadership, Restoring Sanity. You open the book with a quote by the Buddhist teacher Chogyam Trungpa, a man I have also admired through the years. And he said, "Let your wisdom as a human being connect with the power of things as they are." And I think part of
That's it.
the power of what he said and what you share is we really can't do anything if we don't accept the reality of where we are. And maybe you
That's
could share a
right.
little bit of the
That's
wisdom
been
of
the
what you've
hardest
learned.
thing. That's the hardest thing.
Yeah,
The more reality becomes terrifying and terrible and destructive, the more we seek to deny that reality because for many reasons, it's just too awful to comprehend. And there's something that I've noticed. I noticed it in 2008 when the markets were about to collapse, but these senior financial people were shown what might happen with the collapse of the subprime real estate market. It was so catastrophic that they instantly went to, oh, well, that's so bad, it can't happen. And I saw something there that I think I'm now seeing over and over. Faced with the reality of where we are, it is so catastrophically terrible and not stoppable at this point. If you just look, and I'm only speaking of social dynamics and planetary science, biology, chemistry, and physics dynamic, we can't stop these things now. They have their own momentum. But when people get a glimmer of that, it's so bad that they, like these financial wizards, say, oh, well, that can never happen. It's too
right,
bad to happen.
right.
So that's where our hopefulness comes in as a set of blinders rather than, and this is where I'm so clear about the value of my work and the value of seeing clearly. You figure out what's meaningful work. So
Right.
you're not in a fantasy, you're not in some hoped for sense of what's to come that's all good. You're not caught in a fantasy world. You're facing reality. And that is when the only way we find meaningful contribution.
Yeah. I know
Yeah.
I share this with you. I don't know if I've shared this before with you. I've shared it in my writing, but in 1995, I was attending a men's gathering. And as part of the gathering, there was a traditional Native American sweat lodge that was offered, led by a leader, and had the whole group of the men that had attended
Right.
this leadership conference were part of the sweat lodge ceremony, and it was a traditional ceremony of 4 rounds that you pray for wisdom, and in the fourth round, often it gets hotter and hotter as you put in more of the stones. And I happened to be sitting in the back of the sweat lodge where it was the hottest. And they wasn't planned, but they put an extra stone in, and it got so hot that the leader, who, a Native American guy that was leading it, had to get out of the sweat lodge. He basically passed out, and as did other people who got out. I was in the back, and I was transported into a vision.
Mm,
And in the vision, I saw the sinking ship of civilization.
mhm,
And it was a very detailed look into the ship of civilization and going under, and people getting off of the ship, those that were willing to see the truth of it. Most weren't. Most said it can't happen. That's too catastrophic. But the people that did were able to get off at the lifeboat. It was a very detailed thing.
oh,
And afterwards, it was like, what is this? 1995. And I tried to make sense of it, shared it a bit with the people who were there. And then in the vision, I was told, be careful who you tell this to,
right,
because
right,
either it's going to not be believed, or if anybody believes it, they're going to want to get rid of you, because that
right,
kind of truth is not something you want. So part of when I would put it out, and why I brought it up now, was that a number of the people who heard it, who actually said that makes sense, I see it beginning to happen, would say it can't be, because I I have a child that needs medicine, and
right.
if this happens, I wouldn't be able to get him the medicine. So I'll I won't believe it. And I said, well, if it's
Yeah,
true, we're going to have to deal with it. You better believe what's true. So in any event, how do you help people who are, in a
yeah,
sense, know it's true, know that we really are facing some catastrophic changes, to be able to stay present, to, this is part of what I know you get into in all
right.
of your recent books, and particularly the new book. But could you say a little bit at this point about
Yeah, well, the
what
first
you're
thing,
able to do to help people who just don't want to believe the reality because it's too scary?
so it's taken me years to sound this equanimous about this, but it's now a truth. I do not expect most people to get it. And this is historically true. The historian I quote so much in Who Do We Choose to Be, Sir John Glubb, said, there are always only a few people who understand that through self-sacrifice, that's the only route to preserve community. And this is not a mass movement, because the masses of people will disappear in fear and self-protection. This is
Right.
history, this is human biology, it's how we are. Um, so I only, for many, many years, when I was presenting a new paradigm of leadership, people would come up to me and say, well, you're singing to the choir. I said, exactly. I only want to sing to the choir. I only want to make sure we know the songs, we're singing in harmony. I mean, I can riff on that image forever, but it's true. Those of us who do understand and are committing our lives to serving in this time, we know that we are a rare group of people. And we also know that we have to stay together in community to support one another. We're not going to find it in our families. We're not going to find it at work. Even though we can be doing good work and can present it, and it really helps people, if they get wind of the underbelly of this reason why we're so motivated to serve, they can't bear it. And I now feel increasing compassion for
Yeah.
the for the fear that most people are in, and that will increase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm totally with you. That was part of my 1995 recognition, and sharing it part of the vision was be careful who you share it to.
That's
And
right.
so I've shared it little pieces to people that I think will be aware. I wrote a book actually in 1994 called The Warrior's Journey Home, Healing Men, Healing the Planet. Um, and you talk about warriors for the human spirit in your own writing and your work. And I know you've done some trainings for people that
I've done 8 years of devoted training.
indeed. And
Yeah.
could you say a little bit more for those that either are resonating or at least are interested enough to listen at this point
Well, what
to
I
what
noticed,
those are about and how those have been over these 8 years with the
yeah,
people that
well,
have found you.
I have been trained in the Buddhist tradition of the Shambhala warrior. And that's based very well described by Joanna Macy, became her work for the Great Turning, that the prophecy from her teacher is dated from the 11th century. My own Tibetan teacher placed it farther back. But anyway, it said, there comes a time when all of life on earth is in danger. Great barbarian powers have arisen that threaten one another with weapons of mass destruction, and life hangs by the frailest of threads. At that point, the Shambhala warriors come forth from some ancient time and kingdom where everyone was conscious. So now there are a lot of people who are working towards increasing the number of us who are conscious. Yes, I bless that work and pray it's very successful. What I focused on, because I have worked with leaders my whole career, was who are the leaders who are willing to use their position, their power, their influence to create possibility rather than continue this terrible destruction that's going on of life and of people. Just this denial of the spirit of the sacred, denial that people have spirits. And so I started that in about, I don't know, early 2000s, actually, just appealing to leaders. How are you going to use your power and influence?
Mm-hmm.
And this question that became a book title, Who Do We Choose to Be, was something I kept putting out there as I was speaking to leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it became really obvious to me that in order to persevere, I wrote a book called Perseverance. In order to persevere, uh, leaders and now everyone needs a whole different set of skills and qualities and need to train in those. But the first step is you have to be committed to wanting to serve. And once you step into that role, historically, always there are these folks like us, then you have to learn a whole new set of skills that you don't get from normal leadership development programs, right? So you need to develop a stable presence, which you can only develop if you have a stable mind. And there are two routes to a stable mind. One is meditation, where you really learn to watch your mind as it's throwing out these thoughts. And the second, very important, is to notice what triggers you, what your biases and judgments and instantaneous reactions are. And then as part of warrior training, we not only focused on that, still do, but also how do you take in more information? How do you open your eyes to more inclusive perception so you're not seeing through these filters? That's the path of most Eastern spiritual traditions, is to open and see more. And once you see more, you're giving up yourself and you're not so self-protective, and you gradually become very useful to people.
Yes. And I'm curious because this is such a rare practice, maybe, I don't know, throughout human history when these warrior traditions were actually practiced at different times when they were needed, when they came out. But this is the only one I'm aware of in kind of present day practice. And I haven't been through your training, so I haven't been in it. But I'm really curious to what you've learned from the actual interaction with the people that have come, because I'm sure there were things you learned in terms of your own
Well, and
life that then get
we all,
expanded as you actually interact with a group of people
right.
over a number of years.
Well, we've learned some very good things. We've learned that it is possible to be the presence, which is our sort of our major definition, to be the presence of insight and compassion for other people. And we have trained our minds so we don't keep getting angry or we don't keep getting taken down by rage. I mean, we're now dealing, all of us, if you're awake in this world, you're having stronger emotions of anger and rage and powerlessness and grief and sadness. If you're not experiencing them, then you're off in some nice little cocoon.
Right.
But as we open to the world as it is, we experience these very strong emotions, but then the training is to work with them and to learn how to calm ourselves down, how to open our perception, and how to be present for people. Well, once we learn that, what we're discovering is how well it works. Not only does it work well for us to stay calm, open, enthusiastic, a good listener, but we are attracting people to us with our presence. That's the real benefit of this. What I keep stressing more and more, let us be the presence, the memory jogger of what it means to be a good human being. You know, what does it feel like to be around someone who's not flying off the handle at every moment? What does it feel like to be in the presence of someone who really wants to listen to you and not fix you, right? What is it like to be in the presence of someone who is motivated by not some hopeful fantasy of what might change, but just wants to be in the present moment as fully useful as possible? And now we've seen these results with hundreds of people. And so we're continuing with warrior training.
That's that's heartening to know. I've been, on my own kind of healing journey. As you know, my kind of area that I've chosen to focus on is men and men's work, and some of that is just my own experience as part of my own healing journey. I got involved with a men's group that started in 1979, and the same group of guys. We've had a number of us who have died since, but we've been meeting now for
Um,
30, 30 some odd years, 38 years, or more than that. Anyway, however, however many years
Sounds
that
like
is, I have trouble
it's
keeping track of it.
yeah.
45 years, I guess. And and what we discovered was that it is a practice that you engage over a long period of time. And I've taught other, groups, because my experience, and I don't know what yours, I'm a psychotherapist. I work, daily with people that are having the effects of all of the change that's going on. And what I found is that as a group, men seem to act out a lot of the pain and suffering and hurt in a very aggressive, domineering way. There's a joke, but it's, I think, fairly insightful. A comedian, Elaine Boozler, had said that when women get depressed, they eat or go shopping. Men invade another country. It's a whole different way of thinking.
I love
And
it.
I think there's some truth to that. The way men have chosen, and part of our biology and psychology and domination and so on, is to act out in ways that often are quite destructive to the environment, to themselves, high suicide rates, to violence, and so on.
Sure.
And I've understood, and you can tell me if this is your experience, that one, the work that I've been doing is really to try to do what I can do to heal a lot of that male anger and violence and so on. So
And
that
give men an alternative.
exactly.
That's what you're doing. I
Yeah.
mean, we're not going to change this destructive, all-consuming aggression and destruction paradigm that's is apparently coming to an end, but will go out like a supernova in a blaze of glory. But for individual men to actually understand there's a different way of expressing their passion, their service,
Exactly.
that's what you're about, and it fits beautifully with what I'm about.
Well, has it been your experience? Because I know, I think I had heard that in the work that you did and are doing, that women as a group are more attracted, at least to the training than men. And I kept thinking, geez, it'd really be great because I know a lot of men that are doing this work in their own ways would, I think, be attracted to your work if they knew about it. It's part of why I'm
Yeah,
doing
well,
this
it's
interview. Is
great.
that
Early on, our 65% of the people who came to us were women over 50 and even older,
okay?
60s and 70s, who were seeking a new path of fulfillment, a new path of contribution,
Mhm.
and then some younger men. But now it still veers towards women seeking a path of contribution. But we have more and more men who are just stepping into a new way of being, a new way of leading.
Yeah,
And it's harder for them. It's just harder. You know, we are talking, you and I, you're representing the divine masculine, and I'm representing the divine feminine just in this conversation.
yeah,
But we know of both the yin and the yang of it.
yeah,
And we know that that's wholeness. And it's not mushing it together.
right.
It's just going very, very deeply into what each sacred masculine and sacred feminine offers us.
Yes.
And of course, this world has been destroyed. I'm going to put it in past tense because we're past the tipping points here for environmental destruction and massive deaths, starvation, climate catastrophe. We're on that course and we can't get off of it now. And that's the course of events, the history of domination, extraction. I can do whatever the hell I want with whatever resources there, whether it's a person or a woman or my partner or it's a planet. It's such a devastating, but it's innately destructive without the divine feminine, which is about generativity and
Right,
creativity. It's not about gender.
right.
Uh, it's about these great powers that are necessary for creation. I'm trying to take people back to that place. My own reading now is wanting to understand the origins of the goddess culture in Europe, because it was exactly what we see now that indigenous people are still struggling to hold on to and teach us. How do you relate to the mother planet?
Right.
The planet is mother, not to abuse, but to honor and protect. So,
Well, that's the work that we're
and
doing in the world. And it kind of brings me in our discussion today to your new book, the one that I'll just hold up just briefly
yes,
for people to see, the Restoring Sanity: Practices to Awaken Generosity, Creativity, and Kindness in Ourselves and Our Organizations. And could you, for one, talk about why this book now? Because as a
I,
writer, you write books when they feel it's time to say
that's
something.
right. Well, I'll
So
tell you,
I'm
this book,
curious about why this one now, because I've always been looking forward to your next book, but they come when they come, and
and this
this
one
one's
came,
coming.
it's only 9 months since I published Who Do We Choose to Be?
Right.
And this one was meant to be just uh, going into more detail with the practices that are in Who Do We Choose to Be? Who Do We Choose to Be has a very deep analysis of where we are, how it compares to other civilizations, and how to respond as a warrior for the human spirit. Um, it has become, unlike most of my books, it's a very joyful book. It's a book that is based on possibility. In fact, it starts with the quote from my friend and mentor, Marvin Weisbord, who's one of the early leaders in the field of organizational behavior. And so the quote is, and I read this in 1987, and it just undid me for how I was working and changed what I paid attention to going forward as a consultant. So Marvin said, I used to go into a system and ask, okay, what's wrong? How do we fix it? Right? And then I realized the right questions were, what's possible here and who cares? So I am now focused on what's possible within the acceptance of the danger and the destruction of this time. And the ultimate resource is people, is our human spirits. So, and it's very practical. It's the most practical book I've ever put together because it has probably 24 practices that deal with everything from how do we deal with personal attacks and losing our way to how do we solve really complex problems using the multiplicity that's within an organization. And also, what is our faith in people? And we have to have that in order to stay the course here.
Yes.
So, and the imagery in the book and this, everything in here is 3,500 years ago from the island now called Santorini, was known as Thera in the Aegean, which was the highest expression of the goddess way, the feminine, divine feminine way of leading and living life together. So very
Beautiful.
beautiful imagery in the book. All these opulently
Yeah.
clothed women.
Well, one of the things that you've been saying that I think is somewhat unique. I know you're not the only one in the world with this sensibility, but a lot of the people who are ones that are change agents that want to make for a better world either say that in order to keep our hope alive, we have to shave the truth. We can't actually see how much we've passed some tipping points. We have to somehow say, but if only we could, and we
Right.
try to, and that's one way that some people do it. The other way is you just refuse to accept it and you just, maybe you know the truth, but you eat, drink, and be merry, and let's just go out in a blaze of glory. And
I have days like that.
I do too. But you offer in a sense a third way to be, which is that you can accept the truth of what is not going to change, that we've gone past certain tipping points, that you're not going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle. But that doesn't mean that you simply go, nothing can be done. And the key, at least as I'm reading you and hearing you, is that number one, it can't happen as individuals just kind of try to do it themselves, that it has to be part of a community of people. And you talk about islands of sanity and
Right.
being able to come together. And maybe you could talk a bit more, because I think that's such a crucial concept and a practice of how do we joyfully hold on to these qualities while we're, in a sense, interacting in the real world with real people who are,
Yeah.
in pain and suffering and in need of help. and
Well,
change to
see,
help
I
them get
want
through
all
this.
of us to be available to those who are suffering. And so one of the first, I don't know what to call this, maybe it's just clarity, is understanding it's terrible now and it's getting worse. And the reason we can say that with certainty is because we are just enacting the pattern of collapse that has been so well established. So we're not denying where we are. We're also not denying that there will be terrible levels of suffering. And it is escalating now. This year has been an enormous escalation, and it will continue. So within that, there needs to be a personal decision, and this is a biggie. I want to stay. I want to stay and do what I can, as Theodore Roosevelt said, do what you can, where you are with what you have. That commitment has to be there. And for me now, in restoring sanity, it's our faith in people, our willingness to go to battle for people. I mean, for a long time, I was saying to people, you know, we're in a war here, and you can't get it all. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You're going to have to sacrifice. You're going to have to step up. You're going to have to train. Well, now it seems pretty evident that we are in this fight for life, really. And so some of the role models for me and others in warrior training are people who have been in war, who have, it didn't matter what the future was. In the immediate moment, they were saving people, providing sanctuary, helping one another. I think that's the meaning of life. And we have been so deceived with this dominant paradigm of um, success, power over, extraction, all of what you're so clear about. Um, it's led us here, and we have to give up that sense of what, I mean, this is where I can't be any more simple or direct. What is the meaning of our lives? Period. And now we're really facing that because so many things are being lost at the material level and at the relationship level.
Yeah.
And even at the spiritual level, it's getting a little crazy with many people. So we have to be in that contemplation of, what do I want my children to say about me? What do I want my in my own reflection? What will I have found of value? So I get more and more focused on this as the outer accoutrements of life are taken from us.
Mm-hmm.
So once you're clear about that, and you understand the landscape we're in now, which is of increasing destruction of life, why wouldn't I want to be a warrior for the human spirit? That's how I see it.
Exactly. And I
Yeah,
think what you bring to it, and by your being and by your energy, I do the same in my own way, is that this is not a morbid practice. This is not a, let's go through the ringer of destruction because we got to do it and we're going to be
right,
martyrs. It's kind of like, we're all going to die, at least in the form that we're in at some point when you get to be
right,
our age. It becomes more, at least apparent. I have people close to me that die
right.
fairly frequently now at my age. My men's group that I mentioned, when we started in 1979, I was the middle guy in the group. There were three younger than me and three older. Now the three older have died, and now I'm the oldest in the group, and the four of us are still going, and we'll keep going
Yeah,
until the end. But when you get that together, as a lone individual, it seems pretty hopeless. If you're, in the wilderness by yourself, which is no humans survive very long by themselves ever, that we need each other. And that's where, at least I read your islands of sanity to be where we can come together and
Yes.
be able in joy and
Now,
excitement to be warriors.
my experiment with this concept of islands of sanity is I don't know how many people are going to be willing to show up in these new levels of commitment to one another.
Mhm.
I'm experimenting with that now and I'm putting it out to everyone. This is an experiment. Because I don't know who's out there among, I see fearful, self-protective crazies. That wasn't compassionate, but it's how it feels.
Yeah.
Uh, and I see, generally people just shrinking into fear. And how many of us, once we get a glimpse of, okay, there's no turning back, the future is very dark at the material level, am I willing to really be present and be there for my friends and colleagues so that we can create a sanctuary? And in that sanctuary or place of refuge, we can still do good work. And the good work is not about us, it's how do we serve other people. This is a grand experiment for me. I'm very grateful to be in it. I have no idea how it's going to turn out because
Yeah.
I really don't know the numbers of people. Yes, large numbers of people are growing in consciousness and getting more open and awake and maybe dedicated to service. But I know for a long time, if I use the word self-sacrifice, people just instantly said,
Well, I'll tell you a little hopeful sign from my side. I've been doing this work with men, not just men. I work with women as well. But you talk about, there is a tradition of this kind of sacrifice in warrior traditions that go back through human history that were primarily male, that in more modern times they have been in battle, actual physical wars that Jogam Trungpa said, that aggression is not the solution to our problem. That kind of warriorship, it's a different kind of warriorship that has to do with a more spiritual plane. But I can tell you that uh, among men's organizations, men's groups, and my own 45-year group as an example, there are men's groups now that are forming all over the world that have this sensibility, that are groups exactly in the tradition of this kind of warrior tradition that men feel drawn to. Not
right,
all men, and certainly always will be a very small out of the total. In the vision I saw, most people went down with the ship because they didn't want to believe it. The people that got off were a small majority, but the ones that got off were getting off not just to go to an island to take care of themselves and
right,
hide from the reality. They were going to islands of sanity where they were being asked to serve and become the spiritual warriors that are going to serve and protect in that tradition. And I can tell you, among many aspects of the men's world, men's communities, these things are happening and they're being very drawn to that tradition and how to actually put that into practice. And your work is kind of a seminal work for those of us
yeah,
that have been doing it because you give. And again, I want to, hold up this book because we need how to do it and the practices, and the book is full of very detailed
yeah,
ways to practice, and the practice is not easy. Any of us that have been doing warrior practice, I do Aikido. I'm part of a physical practice tradition that goes back
right.
in time. It's a very vigorous practice, but men and women who have this spirit, they want to do this. I mean, if you're going to be alive, why not?
Why
This is what we're
not?
called to do.
Why not? Yeah. And then once you're engaged in really serving and supporting your companions and serving this world, it is incredibly meaningful
Exactly.
and it's often joyful.
Indeed.
No doubt about that.
Indeed. Well,
Yeah.
tell us, as we're kind of wrapping up for today, when the book comes out. I know it isn't quite out as we're talking, but where people
The
can.
book comes out March 19th. I'm going to be doing, and we'll send you the information.
Good.
Uh, I'm doing a Zoom gathering, two of them for about 45 minutes or so of just explaining the book to whoever wants to learn more about it. And that's
Good.
happening on March 5th,
March
which
5th.
March 5th, and I will get you that info.
Good. Well, I will.
Tomorrow, actually, we're going to put it out in an email, but then it's
Good.
my website, margaretwheatley.com.
Good.
It's been a library. You can sign up for 14 weeks free of from my book Perseverance. You can read about all my books. You can download things for free. I meant it to be a resource. It's
It
actually,
definitely is.
yeah. So it's just my name, margaretwheatley.com.
That's great. Well, I want to again thank you for the gifts you've been giving all these many years as a fellow traveler on
That's right.
the other side of the gender spectrum, and the spirit energies of the male and female and yin and yang that
Yes.
continue to.
So I'm going to reciprocate because you are necessary to my work. As
Thank
you
you.
explained, I can be important to yours because we are holding down different levels of awareness and depth to the feminine and the masculine. And this is the moment when, at least as communities, we can embody that union. And out of that comes possibility.
Well, good. So with that, I will definitely stay in touch, and
Yeah,
we'll share our works in the world as long as we're here in this time and this place to do what we could do. And it's really a joy to connect with you today, and
yeah,
hopefully to
yeah.
continue on through the months and years that we'll have to be doing this work.
May that be so. We can make
Indeed.
that happen, Jed. So, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.